Hi, for this video, I am going to be talking about a little bit more scrubbing and some of the different brushes I use to scrub and lift out color. And sometimes it's a very intentional and planned part of a painting. And I'm going to discuss that first. I know that as we've been sort of doing these overlaps, we've been getting stronger and stronger color in this second overlap, which, while it is a second overlap, it has probably has several more layers. And if you remember sort of doing this study, I tried stopping from when I was starting to go dark, I stopped putting on too many layers. So under this, there is, I think, only a layer of that darkness about. Anyways, it will start building up in a way that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So you're welcome to try it and see if it sort of works, but I also sometimes will just say, okay, what I know I'm going to do is by the time see, I've already done a couple shapes here. By the time I'm getting around to these second overlaps are going to be, I'm going to want them to be dark. So this is kind of counterintuitive because if I want them dark, then why am I scrubbing and lifting out color? So this, I'll get to answering that question if I feel like it. No, I will. This is a number 2 white sable Simmons. So it's the kind of brush that it starts out with white hairs, but then quickly gets stained. But that's fine. Actually, the hairs are sort of like that. But they are stiffer than the Casaneo or any natural hair brushes, and the Casaneo is meant to simulate a really nice natural hair soft. So that's a different thing. That's usually for applying. There's no law that says you can't sort of try to lift out color with your softer brush, but it's just going to be less successful at waking up very much of the color and trying to scrub it in a way where you can come back then with a paper towel and press it down and lift it. That was certainly a little bit of color, but I really, if you want to try starting with a soft one, that as a rule that's a good idea. I try to start with softer ones, but the softest one I usually will start with is this one that is a nylon, synthetic nylon, Simply Simmons Tacklon. I think it's called white Tacklon in the technical terms. So back to that question that why am I removing color if I want it to keep getting darker? So and that gets back to just the number of layers that are going down. That one actually didn't lift up as good because it's a lot of phthalo. I'm skipping around too much. But as you can see, there's color under this shape. There's color under that shape. There's color under there. So anywhere I scrub, there's still going to be the sort of the essence, the remains, the initial origins of whatever that color was. It's pretty almost impossible to scrub things back to the white of the paper. especially with staining colors. So that's before I'm going to set myself up to make some dark colors. I'm creating a little a shape with a little less overall paint, so that when I bring in those darker pigments, they will be that much more transparent, but they'll still be influenced by the colors lower down. And truth be told, you could be looking at that and say, "Yeah, I kind of like that," and just as it is, without painting it darker, and that's a perfectly acceptable thing. Just lifting out color like this, like I said probably at the very beginning, is sometimes to fix things and sometimes intentional. But it's not cheating. Repeat, it's not cheating. That didn't want to bring up much color, and that's because partly because it's a staining paints. This is, while this is stiffer than the natural brush, there's still much stiffer bristle brushes that we can use to really start scrubbing if we want to. Before I do that, though, I'm going to just show you often how I will come at a piece after the fact, and if there's something like this that I feel like, oh, I would like to clean up that edge, I'll bring this number 2 Simply Simmons. I'll just sort of put a little water there on that spot right there, and see if I can gently agitate it to the point where it's at least less noticeable. And I would argue that the only person who's going to know about that little thing is me, and you if you watch this video. But and if it's critical, then there's also we can come at it more and try to scrub things away. But that's a little bit more advanced. So what I was going to do was just try to come back on one of these shapes that really is not wanting to give up much of its paint. It's also a way, this is just also a way to kind of refine all the shapes. I mean, by the time you get these layers, this little all these second overlaps are probably all sorts of different kinds of shapes. So it's nice to be able to, in a reductive fashion, sort of erasing, try to refine what the actual shape is. And once again, I'm using this, even though it's a synthetic and a little bit stiffer than my natural hair brushes, there's not a whole lot that's coming up there. So that's when I'm going to go to the more serious tool, and there's a lot of different types of scrubber brushes. They're literally called scrubbies sometimes. And I'm just going to come back. You can probably hear that. And I'm just trying to scrub it and wake it up enough that I can once again come back into here with my paper towel, and I've picked up a lot more color. Let me try that again. So the sequence might be sort of something like this. I might say, maybe I should try a small natural hair. brush to see if I can put some water down and then start waking up the color. And that's only going to get me so far. This is another pretty staining color, so especially for these ones. And then I might say, you know, that wasn't quite making it. I'm going to come in with my a little bit stiffer brush and try to see if I can agitate away a little bit more. I'm gonna I suppose I could have done that after the first one, but that's still somewhat limited in what I'm going to be able to lift up. So that's when I'll come back with something like this scrubber brush. I'll still put some water back in there. Let's sit for a second. What's tricky with the scrubber brushes is it's you know, it's often hard to be really accurate. So what often happens is I will end up coming back over to paint something if I really wanted to refine that shape. I'm going to do one more sort of scrubbing, lifting idea, and then I'll stop this video and then I'll scrub the rest of these before I start painting them with darker pigment. But just in general, the inside circle, which honestly I still don't feel like I have a concept that I'm really happy about, but in general I'm just going to try to at least refine the circular nature. And I'm not wetting the whole shape, the whole circle, because I really want to save some white of the paper, and even doing this can have a way of, if I made the whole thing wet, a little bit of that color can sneak into to areas where I want it to be completely never touched by any sort of watercolor pigment. So now I'm sort of refining this circle, and it's also kind of just scrubbing away some of that color, some of the paint that was overlapping, and eventually I'll come back and use I may come back in and use this one, depends on what I decide, but you can tell I sort of lost my circular nature of that shape. Trying to reestablish that. So one thing about the paper towel, make sure not to shove a paper towel that already has paint, wet paint especially, back into the paper, because that'll just press that color right into there. So I want to make sure I get sort of a clean spot. Relatively clean. Fine one. So that's the idea for this brush, as well as think it was this one, but there's a lot of different ones out there, and there's even some that have sort of a different shape. That's a little bit easier to get straight lines, but even that can be tricky. You know, and yeah, and the last thing is sometimes I will use this brush, which is actually a synthetic bristle. So it's softer than these guys. It's stiffer than these guys, so it's kind of in between. And depending on what the size of the shape is, if it's a bigger area, something like this can be pretty effective as well. And the less abrasive the tool you use,